Before I get into the main subject, I want to explain why I made this video and why it should be of interest to cinephiles. The reason I made this video is to challenge a growing tendency, a tendency among people to write off a work of art as a copy if it possesses even a slight semblance to something they have seen or heard already. Music and films are this tendency's easy praise.
சித்திரம் பேசுறது என் கதை தான், அஞ்சாதே என் கதை தான், அதையும் காப்பினாங்க. இப்போ யுத்தம் செய் காப்பின்னு சொல்லிடுவாங்க நம்ம நாளில். இப்போ அது கமல் சாருக்கு ஒரு கதை பண்ண அதையும் காப்பின்றாங்க. இன்னும் ஒரு 7 கதை வச்சிருக்காங்க அதையும் காப்பின்றாங்க. அப்போ கவலையே இல்லைங்க.
You know from which movie this movie is copied? Yeah, மச்சான், which movie da மச்சான்? It's from a Czechoslovakian movie da. See, ஏங்க நானும் பார்க்குறேங்க. என்னங்க இது? தெரிய வேணாமா?
இல்லை என்ன சொன்னாலும் நீங்கள் எல்லாரும் ஏதாவது நண்பர்கள் வந்து சொல்லிடுவாங்க. ஆக்சுவலாக இது இந்த மாதிரி நாங்கள் வந்து ஒரு செக்கஸ்லோவாக்கியா ஒரு படம் பார்த்துட்டோம்னு சொல்லிடுவாங்க. ஆக்சுவலாக அதனால தான் போன படம் நான் வந்து போர்த்துகீசிய படம் 13ஆம் நூற்றாண்டுலேருந்து காப்பி அடிச்சுன்னு சொன்னேன். இதை வேணால் ஒரு 2-3 நூற்றாண்டுக்கு போயிட்டு ஒரு 11ஆம் நூற்றாண்டில் வந்த ஒரு இட்டாலிய படம் கூட நான் சொல்லிக்கலாம். ஆக்சுவலாக அப்படி அதுலேருந்து காப்பி அடிச்சுன்னு கூட சொல்லிக்கலாம்.
எத்தனை பேர் கிக்கு ஜீரோ பார்த்துருப்பீங்க? எனக்கு என்ன வருத்தம்னா, விமர்சனம் பண்ணலாம், தப்பு இல்லை. யார் பண்ணுறாங்கன்னா படித்தவங்க பண்ணுறாங்க.
ஒருத்தன் வந்து 16 வயசுல ஒருத்தர் எழுதுறான், பெரிய மாதிரி படம் எடுத்திருக்காங்க. நான் படம் எடுக்க முடியும். ஒரு நீங்க பிளாக் போய் திறந்து பாருங்க, இவருக்கு அந்த படத்துல இருந்து காப்பி அடிச்சிருக்கு. எனக்கு டைம் இல்லை சார் இன்னொரு படம் பார்க்கறதுக்கு.
I want to challenge this tendency because this tendency of writing off shuts our involvement as an audience significantly. It prevents one from seeing the spirit or the presence behind the supposed copied work. To elaborate this point further, I take the film Nandhalala. In the forthcoming sections, I will be talking about the presence behind the film, which is uniquely Mysskin's. What other tool one has, other than auteurism or auteur theory, to talk about the presence or personality of a director? Before I present my auteurist analysis of Nandhalala and Mysskin's ever in general, I must give a short introduction to the film Kikujiro and a clarification on how I'm going to use the term auteurism. First of all, I'm not going to use auteurism as a synonym for auteur theory. Because auteurism has never been a theory in the proper sense of the word. As film scholar David Bordwell observed, it wasn't a theory of cinema as such, but rather a heuristic approach to criticism. Tips on what to think about and look for when you wanted to plumb a movie's artistry. Andrew Sarris himself, who coined the term auteur theory, later conceded. At this late date I am prepared to concede that auteurism is and always has been more a tendency than a theory, more a mystique than a methodology, more an editorial policy than an aesthetic procedure. Secondly, I must acknowledge the potential risk of using auteurism to analyze a film. That is overgeneralization. Let me give an example. Radwij Rangan, in his review of Picasso, dedicated a whole paragraph which details some of Mysskin's signature elements. Let's take one example from the supposed signature elements. Characters whose hairstyle obscures part of the face, Prasanna and Anjathi, Puha Hegde and Mugamudi. Mr. Rangan groups these 3 characters under the category called characters whose hairstyle obscures part of the face. One of the biggest perils of auteur-centric criticism is finding parallels and repetition in different films of a particular director, at the cost of overlooking the novelty of each individual film. Mr. Rangan's this generic grouping is one such outcome of generic auteur-centric criticism. Let me elaborate further. This kind of generalization encourages one to see these different characters' hairstyles as mere stylistic recurrence of Mysskin, like Tarantino's trunk shot, and discourages one from seeing the individuality of them. Aren't these characters' hairstyles that obscures part of their faces have different purposes other than what Rangan cared to see or elaborate? In Anjathi, I believe, the Prasanna character has this hairstyle to represent the feminine side within him. The character's gestures, practices, and its unisex name explicate this point further.
Daya.
This aspect of the film culminates in the scene where this Prasanna character gets shot at his penis. On one level, this shooting seems like a crude poetic justice for his sexual perversion. On another level, this shooting acts as a closure to this character's unacknowledged or repressed sexuality and the perversion that arises because of that. Both of these occur in Mysskin's other films also. This vigilante sense of poetic justice gets a stronger manifestation in Youtham Say. And we can see the psychoanalytical drive behind characters in almost all of Mysskin's films. Let's look at this character's hairstyle and its implication. Picasso film's narrative progression, its excessive use of vibrant red and green color in its visuals, and this character's hairstyle, all of them are at the service of the film's core idea, which is the difference of seeing the truth as opposed to seeing and being content with half-truths. Just like this color-blind person, the protagonist is also half-blind, unable to see the truth which is plainly visible. Through this juxtaposition Mysskin makes this point clearly. In this scene, the protagonist understands the truth as the wind lifts hair off his face. You can disagree with this observation by saying, in the climax scene, the protagonist's eyes shouldn't be half covered because he had seen the truth already. But not quite. The protagonist and the father haven't grasped the truth wholly yet. That occurs at this point as the father character pleads futilely to God for help. The real God comes. They finally see her for what she is as the wind washes their faces. Through hairstyle, color, juxtaposition, narration, genre conventions and other things, Mysskin makes his point about the significance of knowing as opposed to half-seeing. This core idea of Pisasu is relatable to Mysskin himself.
மிஸ்கின் சார் பற்றி எனக்கு ஒரு பயம் இருக்கும். ஏன்னா எல்லாருமே சொல்லிட்டு இருப்பாங்க, அவர் அவரோட ஸ்டேஜ் அப்பியரன்ஸ் இருக்குல்ல, அதை பார்த்தே நான் அவர்கிட்ட ரொம்ப நாள் கிட்ட வராமல் இருந்தேன் நான் ஆக்சுவலி. சார் அப்போ தான் நான் நேரடியாக போய் பார்க்குறேன். நான் பார்த்தோன்னே வாடா செல்லக்குட்டி அப்படின்னு கட்டி பிடிச்சி முத்தம் கொடுத்தாரு. அந்த முத்தம் இன்னும் எனக்கு ஞாபகம் இருக்குது. ரொம்ப சந்தோஷமான முத்தம். அந்த முத்தத்தில் நான் ஒட்டுமொத்தமான அன்பை நான் அன்னைக்கு எனக்கு கிடைச்சது. நான் அந்தலேருந்தே மிஸ்கின் சார் மேலே இருந்த மதிப்பீடு எல்லாமே எனக்கு போச்சு.
இன்டர்வியூஸ் எல்லாம் பார்க்கும்போது தட்டார் புட்டார்னு சார் பேசுகிறாங்க அப்படின்றது, அண்ட் நம்ம சாரோட உட்காந்துருக்க தோரணை இப்படியே பார்த்துட்டு கண்ணாடி போட்டு பார்த்துக்கணும், சார் பயங்கர ரஃப்பான ஆள், நம்ம கரெக்டாக கேர்ஃபுல்லாக இருந்துக்கணும் அப்படின்னு நான் நினச்சிட்டே இருப்பேன். பட் ஸ்வீட்டஸ்ட் மிஸ்கின் சார் அவ்வளோ 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 ஸ்வீட். நான் சொல்லக்கூடாது, நான் என்ன நினச்சி வச்சுருந்தேனோ அதுக்கு அப்படியே ஆப்போசிட் தான் சார்.
As with other good films of Mysskin, this film feels like it stems from a place deep within himself. A place where one could see the vulnerable side of Mysskin. Let's go back to Bharatwaj Rangan's generic grouping. I think it's obvious if you have seen Mugamudi why Pooja Hegde's hair obscures her face and denies the sight for the hero at this point of the film. Right? I think I sufficiently explained and acknowledged the major limitations of auteur-centric criticism, which I believe is overgeneralization and generic grouping. The reason I'm explaining these limitations is to make you aware that my subsequent analysis of Nandhalala may also have these limitations as well. Now, let's get to the subject. Hi, I'm Ajay and welcome to my channel. As I stated in the opening of this video, my aim is to argue why Nandhalala is an original and personal work of Mysskin. For that, I need to talk about the film Kikujiro and why I think Nandhalala is different from Kikujiro and how that difference came into being because of Mysskin's personal mediation. Before I talk about the subsurface aspects of Kikujiro, let me tell you the story of Kikujiro briefly. The film starts with a kid named Masao, who's now on a summer vacation. With his friend gone to vacation and his only family member, his grandmother, gone to work, he is superbly bored. Then he accidentally discovers his mother's photo and her whereabouts. Then embarks on a journey to find her. A local acquaintance comes to know of his plan. Without talking the kid out of his plan, she decides to send her naive husband Kikujiro with Masao along with some money. Kikujiro gambles away most of the money. Short of money, they start their journey. On their way, they encounter different people, a hotel manager, a pedophile, a couple, a banker and a poet. They finally get to the mother's place. They see that the mother has her own family now. Sad and disappointed, Masao walks away. Kikujiro tries to comfort him by saying this may not be his mother. Masao, unconvinced and still sad. Kikujiro borrows a bell from a biker duo by bullying them and gives it to the kid. The remaining film consists of scenes in which these social misfits try to comfort and entertain the kid, Masao. In between these funny scenes, we get a melancholic scene in which Kikujiro decides to see his mother, who's now in an old age home. Seeing her condition, he decides not to meet her. After this scene, the tone of the film changes. We return to these social misfits who, in the name of entertaining the kid, become kids themselves. In the end, these two characters become friends. This is what Kikujiro is, if one is content to see the film very superficially. If you compare Nandhalala with the superficial facade of Kikujiro, you can find a lot of parallels. One could even go on to say Nandhalala is copied from Kikujiro by citing these parallels. To avoid this dreadful conclusion, we need to see Kikujiro a bit more closely. Takeshi Kitano decided to make Kikujiro because he was tired of people labeling him as the maker of Yakuza or gangster films. In his words, "I decided to try and make a film no one would expect from me." The choice of making a different film did not restrict Kitano from making the film any less personal. Kitano makes the film personal in at least 3 ways. 1. By making the audience aware of both his TV persona and film persona. 2. By giving an ode to cinema. 3. By incorporating his real-life experiences. Let me elaborate on these points. Before Kikujiro, Takeshi Kitano had 2 images in his native country Japan. One is the image of a comedian who does skits on TV by the name of Beat Kitano. The other is the image of a filmmaker who does cold and violent films, often about gangsters. It is with this background, one needs to understand Kikujiro's Yakuza identity and its intertextual dimension. Similar to the tone and context of this scene, the film Kikujiro has several scenes in which Yakuza identity is evoked only to be ridiculed. Its aim is twofold: 1 is to make the audience laugh with the awareness of intertextuality, and 2 is to evoke some pity for this naive, ill-mannered and overgrown bully. Needless to say, Mysskin was only interested in the second aspect. Kitano maximizes this effect of intertextuality by bringing in his old TV partner Beat Kiyoshi in this scene, and by evoking his TV show Takeshi's Castle in this sequence. The intertextuality of Kikujiro does not stop here. It gets a more meaningful manifestation. Throughout most of the film, Masao is seen in a sulking posture, looking down. On one level, this posture conveys the character's loneliness. This is further emphasized by flat compositions, excessive use of long lens and high-angle shots. But this posture has a more significant role. Film historian Aaron Jarrow, in his book on Kitano, writes, "One can say that the narrative aim of the film is to get Masao to look up, which he eventually does most significantly by viewing the stars when they camp out and play." What Mr. Jarrow neglects, in my opinion, is the crucial detail of the scene. In this scene, Masao looks up at the sky, and then we get a reverse shot of what he sees, a star-filled sky, but non-diegetically Kitano superimposes the star-filled black sky with cosplayers acting out different roles for the kids' entertainment. This act of cosplaying for the kids' entertainment continues from previous scenes where we got an Indian and an alien. I believe this imagery symbolizes cinema itself. Popular cinema in particular, from which we get sentiments, amusement, entertainment. And more importantly, an escape from reality. Masao and Kikujiro escape from the busy Asakusa district of Tokyo to the quiet countryside, then return back to their home, just like we would return to our home from a movie theater, after experiencing a rollercoaster of emotions. It is important to note that Kitano himself spent his childhood in Asakusa district. It is no accident that Kitano cited The Wizard of the Oz as one of the inspirations for this film. In this way, one can argue, Kikujiro is primarily about film viewing experience and our relationship to cinema itself. Takeshi Kitano personalized this film even further. Kikujiro is the name of Kitano's real father. In an interview, Kitano said, "When I was growing up, I hardly knew him. He gambled and drank, was either absent or violent. I was the youngest of 4, and he terrified me. But when I became a father myself, I reflected on this solitary and sad man and tried to invent a relationship with him." One time in his childhood, Kitano was forced to spend a summer vacation with his dad. As one IMDb user wrote, maybe Takeshi Kitano remembered his travel with his father, Kikujiro, maybe he just wanted to show his father just like he wanted to see him. As Kitano's father was one of the inspiring forces for his Kikujiro, Mysskin's brother was the same for Nandhalala.
நான் வந்து நந்தலால் எடுக்கும்போது இதே குற்றச்சாட்டு என்ன சொன்னாங்க, அதாவது ஒரு படத்தை சுட்டுட்டாங்கன்னாங்க. அதாவது கதை வறட்சியில் அல்லது உழைக்க முடியாமல் முதுகெலும்பு இல்லாதவர்கள் அந்த மாதிரி பேணுவாங்க. நான் அப்படி பார்க்கல. அந்த படம் வந்து பண்ணும்போது என்னுடைய அண்ணன் வந்து ஒரு மென்டல் அசைலமில் இருந்து இறந்து போனார். அந்த படத்தில் அந்த மாதிரி ஒரு மென்டலி ரிட்டார்டட் பர்சனை நான் பார்த்தேன் அந்த படத்தில். என்னுடைய மாஸ்டர் படம் அது. ஸோ நான் என்ன பண்ணேன், அந்த கரு எனக்கு வந்து என்னுடைய வாழ்க்கையில் இருக்க கரு, அந்த கரு எடுத்து என்னுடைய தமிழ் சார்ந்து நான் எழுதினேன்.
But this impetus alone does not account for all the qualities, similarities and dissimilarities of the films Nandhalala and Kikujiro. As Peter Woolen wrote in one of his books, incidents and episodes in the original screenplay or novel can act as catalysts. They are the agents which are introduced into the mind, conscious or unconscious, of the auteur and react there with the motifs and themes characteristic of his work. The director does not subordinate himself to another author, his source is only a pretext which provides catalysts, scenes which fuse with his own preoccupations to produce a radically new work. Thus the manifest process of performance, the treatment of a subject, conceals the latent production of a quite new text, the production of the director as an auteur. Kikujiro only acted as a catalyst for Mysskin. To understand how Kikujiro influenced Nandhalala and in what ways Mysskin differed from Kitano's approach, we need to understand Mysskin's approach to cinema a little better.
அதனால சமூகத்திற்கு இவன் ஒரு டார்ச் லைட் மாதிரி ஒரு கலங்கரை விளக்கமாக என்னுடைய படங்கள் இருக்கும்னு நினைக்கிறேன்.
In the upcoming video, I talk about Mysskin's approach to cinema and how that was shaped by his view of an artist. In the next video, I also talk about the tension that stems from interaction between Mysskin's earnest side and self-indulgent side. In my opinion, understanding this tension is crucial if one wants to get anywhere near the artistic personality of Mysskin. Right? If you like this video and are interested in seeing the next part of this video, do subscribe to this channel.